Islip Town Supervisor Angie Carpenter. The month of October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which celebrates the contributions of workers with disabilities while increasing awareness and education on employment issues in the disabled community. Today I'm being joined by my colleague on the Islip Town Board, Councilman Jim O'Connor, who serves as the chairperson for the Town of Islip's Disability Advisory Board, along with Colleen Merlo, who is the CEO of the Association of Mental Health and Wellness located in Ronkonkoma. In 2022, the theme for National Disability Employment Month is Disability, Part of the Equity Equation, which recognizes the important role that people with disabilities play in a diverse and inclusive American workforce. At the Town of Islip, we are committed to working with employers and residents to increase disability awareness and employment opportunities for those with disabilities. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So Jim.
Hi, I'm Islip Town Councilman Jim O'Connor. The mission of the Disability Advisory Board is to serve as a resource to the Islip community by addressing accessibility, seeking equal rights, removing barriers, and promoting opportunities for individuals with disabilities within the Town of Islip. I couldn't ask for a better leader and advocate of this cause and countless others than our very own Islip Town Supervisor Angie Carpenter. I also want to thank the members of the Disability Advisory Board for their continuous support, which allows us to push the mission forward.
So we have some statistics. 44 million adults, making up approximately 18.5% of the population, report having a mental health condition. The Town of Islip provides reasonable accommodations when an employee has a medically diagnosed mental illness, allowing for a quieter work environment, utilizing headphones to focus as long as it doesn't cause a safety issue. Leave of absence and or use of occasional leave for therapy or other related appointments. Breaks according to individual needs rather than a fixed schedule. And the addition of room dividers or cubicles between workspaces to help reduce noise or visual distractions. White noise to block out distractions, and beverages and or food permitted at workstations if necessary to mitigate the side effects of medications. So I'm going to sort of start a little bit of a dialogue here, and would say that both employees and employers often ask if mental health conditions are protected and recognized under the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, and other non-discrimination laws. So Colleen, can you please confirm if they are, and what are some examples of mental health conditions that are recognized under the ADA and similar legislation?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. So mental health conditions that are diagnosed and are documented are protected under the ADA, similar to other disabilities. So something that you might see that would be protected by the ADA would be something like depression, or bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and schizophrenia. Those are some of the common ones that you might see an accommodation or made for in the workplace.
Great.
So the National Institution of Mental Health estimates that 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. Therefore, it's likely that most employers have at least one employee with a mental health condition. Colleen, that makes me want to bring up the term invisible disabilities. I noticed that the term is being used more often. Can you please elaborate on what it means and the challenges it poses for both employees and employers?
Sure. And that statistic is absolutely accurate. And for people listening, just think about that. So 1 in 5 people. So think about your workplace, and statistically speaking, if there's 100 people in the workplace, 20 people, and you don't even know, have a mental health condition. And so some people are going to need an accommodation, and other people with a mental health diagnosis are in the workplace with no accommodation. So I want to make that point as well. So getting back to your question, invisible disability. So invisible is something that you can't see. So most times someone who's diagnosed with like a mental health diagnosis versus a physical disability that you might be able to see, you're not going to know that by just looking at the person. And that can complicate things for the people that we work with because it's a choice. Am I going to disclose this to my employer or not? And what are the benefits of disclosing that I have a diagnosis? And what are some of the challenges if I disclose, right? May I be passed up for a promotion? May I be discriminated against? There's a real fear sometimes that causes people not to disclose, but then they're losing the benefit, right? If they could benefit from an accommodation, they need to disclose.
So that's really got to be a bit of a conundrum, I would imagine. You know, you clarified some of the conditions that are protected under the ADA, but that most employers must provide reasonable accommodations if requested by their employees. So how does an employee typically make that kind of a request? And does the employer have a right to require a medical diagnosis?
So if someone has a mental health diagnosis and they are having a problem with some aspect of their job, and they know that they've used an accommodation in the past, or they think something might benefit them, like you mentioned, a flexible work schedule or even working remotely, then I would say that is the right time to disclose to an employer and let the employer know that, yes, I do have this diagnosis. The employer will require by law that the person provides documentation and proof that they have this diagnosis and are entitled to an accommodation. And then from there, I think it's always best for the employee and the employer to have a dialogue because, you know, as the employer, you have the right to say what a reasonable accommodation is and make the decision as to whether or not an accommodation will be granted. But the person with the disability knows best what's going to work for them. So something that I might propose won't work for someone. So we really encourage people to have that dialogue, but making that choice can be really difficult.
Yeah, and it's got to be hard for the person to really feel comfortable. And I guess as an employer, we've got a responsibility and really need to take it seriously to create the kind of environment that a person can feel comfortable sharing what probably is very personal to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And something else too is that as employers, we have to make sure that we're protecting the person's confidentiality. So who needs to know that this person has the accommodation? Very few people, right? Maybe the direct supervisor, HR, but that conversation should be, you know, confidential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jim?
So hopefully employers are aware of the types of reasonable accommodations that they can offer people with physical or developmental or communication disabilities. They may not be as familiar with accommodations for their employees who suffer from a mental health condition. Can you perhaps give us some examples of what a reasonable accommodation might look like for an employee that suffers from, let's say, anxiety, depression, or let's say an eating disorder?
Sure. So I think, first of all, a lot of these accommodations can be done at little to no cost. You know, we spoke about some of them earlier. A room divider, if somebody gets easily distracted, putting up a room divider or allowing that person to use white noise headphones is something that very simply can make a difference in that person's ability to avoid distractions. I've actually seen also software installed on computers so that pop-ups don't come. I mean, I know for myself, when that email comes through and you're working on something else, you shift gears. And for someone who has difficulty refocusing, that can be really distracting. So a simple pop-up blocker could work. We've also seen accommodations that have to do with flexible workplace schedules. So if somebody takes medication that might make them sleepy in the morning, if they could come in a little bit later, then they'll be most productive while they're there. Having more frequent breaks, it doesn't mean that they're doing less work in the workday, but scheduling so that they can have more frequent breaks if that is something that is needed.
Okay. So the Association for Mental Health and Wellness provides workplace training to the Long Island business community. So what type of training do you provide for business owners and hiring managers?
It really varies depending upon what the employee workplace setting needs. So sometimes they want us to come in and do an overview of what mental health looks like so that people are more aware. for both their workplace, but also for their personal lives, right? That's something that's really, it affects everyone in and out of the workplace. We can also go in and work with workplaces who want to promote mental wellness, to do lunchtime series, go in on a rotating basis, biannually or more frequently, and kind of do those workplace wellness seminars. We can also help with workplaces that want to promote mental wellness on a more global scale, again, with some education and things like that.
Well, if I could, that really sounds very appealing to me, because I think the fact that you said so many people have a mental health disorder, but you wouldn't know it, okay? So to create an environment where people feel a little bit more comfortable sharing that, and maybe taking advantage of opportunities that they have to address some of their needs. Now, in the town, we've got the EAP program available, and as many times as I talk about it, and it's very confidential, are people really, taking advantage of it? So maybe having a Lunch and Learn series, having someone like yourself come in and talk about the topic, maybe just the little trigger that they need to point them in that direction.
And it's also helping employers have the conversation. So if you see someone who's struggling, you don't want to go up to them and say, hey, I think you're depressed, right? Because what's that person going to do? Probably get defensive.
Right.
And there can also be some legal ramifications to that as well for the employer. So we also want to talk through with supervisors. If you are noticing that someone is having difficulty in the workplace, how do you have that conversation? How do you start that conversation? And very briefly, it's really focusing on supporting the employee and also holding them accountable to their role.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to follow up on that one.
Great.
So this is one of a series of videos we've had talking about this particular topic. And it serves as a great forum for us to shed awareness, but it can also serve as a great forum for you to talk about what your organization is doing and maybe serve as a model for what other organizations can do. So I'm interested in knowing, I think you've found an opportunity to do some job placement for folks who suffer from these types of mental health disabilities. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. So working is something that is really vital for people's overall well-being, and so we absolutely want anyone who wants to work and can work in the workplace. And so some of what we do is training people to get jobs that they look for, and that can be everything from people who have never had a job and want to venture out into the world and work. And we've worked with people who at one time was working as an architect and had some setbacks and wants to get back into the workplace. We also work with veterans to help them find workplace settings that will suit their skills. And I really think it runs the gamut in terms of the type of employers that we work with, because the people that we work with have wide variety of skills and talents, and so we really try to work with employers to best meet those skills and talents.
Over the past couple of years, the unprecedented toll of COVID-19 pandemic on our lives has really catapulted, I think, the importance of physical and emotional wellness. And since then, many companies have invested in different programs and initiatives to support their employees' overall well-being. Colleen, do you think that this type of proactive behavior also addresses mental health in the workplace? In other words, does physical and emotional wellness have a different or direct effect on mental wellness?
I think absolutely. When someone isn't feeling well, whether it be physical or emotional, they're not at their best in the workplace. And so we really do want employers to do this, not just because we think it's the right thing, although we do know it is the right thing for the individual who might be living with a mental illness, but it's also good workplace practice in terms of reducing absenteeism. When employers pay attention to mental health and promote mental health from a preventive standpoint, employees tend to be more productive and satisfied with their workplace, and we know that it's a very competitive job market right now, and so anything an employer can do to enhance the culture of the organization, and really, as you said before, just talking about it and making it okay to talk about these things is important.
And I appreciate you saying that because, as a government official and employer, people don't necessarily think of government as a business, but it is. We're running a business with employees,
Yes.
and I think it's incumbent upon us to create that kind of environment that helps in job retention, helps in employee morale, and especially when you're talking about government and employees that interact with the public all of the time, you want them to be happy. You want them to be grounded and not have the public feel like, oh, I pay their salary and they're not even, being nice to me or whatever. So, I think it's really, really important, and I appreciate what you've said, and we take it to heart. We really, really do. Right, Jim?
And it makes good business sense too, because in addition to serving on the town board, I have a small business, a small law firm, and when our employees are happier and better, kind of grounded, they're better employees, and it provides better business. I know Angie knows that in her experience as a business owner as well. You want your folks to be happy and contributing because it makes them better employees and it gives a better product to your customers. So what are some small things that a business owner who was watching this in the town of Islip could do to try, with some small steps they can take to try and improve that sort of environment?
I mean, it could be as simple as hanging up a sign that says, we care about your mental health. Seeing that every day makes a difference. It's something simple. It costs nothing. Providing resources, just leaving them out in the employee lunchroom so that people see, oh, my employer is leaving this out, or this is okay to talk about here. Whether it be the crisis hotline or a brochure about mental health, or leaving EAP, if you have the EAP, making sure that that's first and foremost. Staff training. So staff training is always a topic that's really important, and it's important that people get the skills necessary for their jobs. But I really encourage employers to also look beyond that and think about what could enhance the person's well-being overall. So bringing in a nutritional expert, bringing in someone who can talk about, managing stress, managing anxiety. We also do some presentations on that sandwich generation, people who are caring for young ones and also aging parents. It's a very stressful place for a person to be, and it can really take someone outside of their role when they're pulled in those directions. So we do some of those trainings as well. I think just being open to the topic, and if someone is struggling, to also hold the person accountable, but also be as supportive as you can.
So now, especially after COVID, as more and more companies are settling into a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, what are some examples of reasonable accommodations for mental health conditions in a remote workplace? And also, remote employees, I would think, can burn out quicker, since working remotely can kind of blur the lines from designated work to, what is in their home environment if, they're working from home. So what are some of the helpful tips that you can share for employers that have this conundrum at this point?
It's interesting. I think the remote work is a blessing and a curse, because in some ways it can give people more work-life balance because they're able to switch back and forth and be present. But it also can be really challenging to turn off that computer at the end of the day and go to your role as a wife or a mother or a father or whatever it might be. So I think the accommodation piece is the same that you could give in a physical workplace. It could be a shift in schedule. I think it's really important, though, for employers to check in with their remote workforce. I think it's harder to manage a remote workforce.
Oh, I believe so, too.
Right? It takes constant checking in. You don't have those more natural, casual conversations that you might have as you're passing each other in the hallway or sitting together and eating lunch. So you have to create that. Otherwise, it can be very isolating to work from home, and you can see people really burn out quickly, as you said.
I would think, too, that missing, for someone who is suffering from mental health issues, missing that social interaction in some instances, for some who want to withdraw, it can be helpful, but not really, because that's not a typical, normal way to live, really.
Right. And so for someone where that is one of the symptoms of the illness, where they do withdraw or are socially isolated, it can be really hard for them to re-enter the workplace after so much time. And I think that is something that employers should consider. If you're having someone who's struggling to come back or seems resistant, why is that? Is it that they are just loving being home and, petting their dog while they're working? Or is it that the person's really struggling with a mental health diagnosis and needs some support and intervention or accommodation?
Yeah.
Colleen, the Association for Mental Health and Wellness, located right here in Ronkonkoma in the town of Islip, serves a whole host of different communities. I know you mentioned the work you're doing with the veterans who suffer from mental health issues, but you also offer other services. I know in the early days of the pandemic, thanks to the supervisor's assistance, we were able to distribute PPE materials to some of our businesses, and I came and visited you and distributed some of that with you, compliments of the Town of Islip Community Development Agency. And I saw the wonderful work you do in your food pantry. Tell us some other services that your organization does.
Sure. So we provide support services to people who have chronic mental health conditions. People can come on site 5 days a week. We have programming where they can get individual as well as group intervention to meet their goals. So that might be an employment goal, it might be going back to school, it might be reconnecting with a family member. Unfortunately, a lot of folks who have mental health diagnoses have difficult relationships at times, and so we work to help people repair those relationships so that they can live the life that they want to. We also provide care coordination and case management for both adults and children so that people can manage their very complex mental health and physical health needs. And then we do have programming for veterans, which encompasses our Dwyer peer-to-peer program, as well as housing for veterans, as well as housing for people who have mental health diagnoses. So that's just a snippet of some of the programs we offer.
Great. So I think we are just about the time to wrap up. Jim, why don't you share where people can reach Colleen?
Yeah, they can reach out to your organization. I know you have your chili cook-off this Saturday. Best of luck with it. I hope it's a great success. It's a fun fundraiser to have a cook-off of chili. And I hope the chili is really good. So thank you, Colleen, for joining Supervisor Carpenter and myself on this important topic. To learn more about National Disability Employment Awareness Month, please visit the Department of Labor website. It's dol.gov/NDEAM. And to learn more about support and services offered by the Association of Mental Health and Wellness, please visit mhaw.org.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for your work with the advisory board, and certainly Colleen for all the good work that you've done and for the tips that you've shared with us today. And I thank everyone at home for watching, tuning in to this important discussion regarding the many contributions that workers with disabilities provide and how employers can enhance their overall success by taking these small, empowering tips. We invite you to join the discussion, share this message, help us spread awareness during this National Disability Employment Awareness Month so that together we can build a successful, happy, and bright future for all here in the town of Islip. So again, Colleen, thank you so much. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.